The Black Pen. My name is Grace. I am 68 years old. I am standing in front of a mirror holding an old black pen. My hands are shaking. I gave my son my life, but he gave me a pen and a smile. He said it was to protect my health. I believed him, but he didn't want to save me. He wanted to sell me. Mark chose money over his own mother. I felt a deep, cold pain in my heart. I thought family was forever. But that day, I lost everything. I was all alone. I spent 40 years as a single mother. My husband died when Mark was just a baby. For 40 years, Mark was my whole world. Every single morning, I woke up at 5. I worked hard to make our home a paradise. I ironed Mark's shirts until they were smooth and crisp. I cooked hot, delicious soup for him every day. I loved the smell of my life back then. I always smelled like fresh laundry, and the house smelled like warm, toasted bread. In the garden, my red roses were bright and beautiful. I felt so proud of my family. I thought my son was my hero. I gave him every piece of my heart. But then everything changed. Mark married Jessica. She was young, but she was very lazy. She never touched a broom. She never cooked a single meal. She took my service for granted. Suddenly, I felt like a servant in my own home. Mark changed too. He became very quiet and moody. He was always stressed. I knew his business was in trouble. He had many debts, and the creditors were calling. Mark started to avoid my eyes. When I spoke, he looked at the floor. He never laughed with me anymore. At night, I sat alone in the dark kitchen. I heard them in their bedroom. They whispered for hours and hours. Their voices were low, sharp, and cold. I stood in the hallway, and my hands were shaking. I whispered to myself, "Why are they hiding things from me?" My chest felt tight. I knew a secret was growing in the dark. The sweet smell of roses was gone. Now the house felt heavy and strange. One evening, Mark came to the kitchen. He looked at me with sad eyes. He held my hand gently. "Mother," he said softly, "I am worried about you. You are forgetting things. Your back hurts every day. I cannot see you suffer." I was surprised. I felt a warm wave of happiness. I thought he finally noticed my hard work. I whispered to myself, he still cares about me. The next day, Mark did something special. He took me to a beautiful restaurant for dinner. The lights were soft, and the music was sweet. For a moment, I forgot about Jessica's cold face and the dirty house. Mark looked into my eyes and smiled. "Mother, you are the most important person in the world to me," he said. My eyes filled with tears of joy. I knew my son was still the good boy I raised. I felt so safe and loved. I trusted him with my whole heart. When we returned home, Mark brought a stack of papers to the table. He did something I did not expect. He knelt on the floor beside my chair. He looked like a little boy again. "Mother, please sign these papers," he whispered. "It is for a special health insurance. I want you to have the best doctors. I want you to live a long, healthy life with us." My heart was full of love. He held the papers for me. His hand carefully covered the top part of the page. I did not see the words deed of gift. I only saw the line for my signature. I did not read the small letters. I did not ask questions. Why would I? He was my son. I picked up the pen. I signed my name on the last page. I thought I was protecting my future. I knew I was helping my son. I did not know he was about to stab me in the back. That night, I could not sleep because I was so happy. The next morning, I cleaned the house with a big smile. I polished the wooden table until it shined. I washed the floors. I looked at the walls of my beautiful home. I felt so lucky, I whispered to myself. Everything will be okay now. I was happy, but I was wrong. I was cleaning a house that was no longer mine. I was happy, but I was walking into a dark trap. I did not know that I just signed a paper to lose my life. I felt peaceful, but the storm was coming. On Monday morning, a black car arrived at the gate. Mark helped me into the seat. "Mother, this is for your health check," he said softly. I smiled at him. I thought he was my protector. I felt so grateful for my kind son. The car drove to a quiet grey part of the city. We stopped in front of a tall, old building. It smelled like old soap and sadness. I looked for a doctor, but I only saw a small office. I asked the manager about my health insurance package. He looked at me and laughed. "Insurance?" he said. "There is no insurance, lady. Your son sold your house this morning. He used the money to pay his debts. He sent you here. You are staying here now. The government pays for your bed. My world stopped. I knew I was in a nightmare. My chest felt tight, and I could not breathe. I took out my phone and called Mark. He did not answer. I called again and again. Finally, Jessica answered. Her voice was sharp and cruel. "Stop calling, Grace," she shouted. "The house is gone. We paid our debts. We are starting our new life. Stay there and be happy. Don't call us again." Then the line went silent. I stood there frozen. My hands were shaking. My small bag fell to the floor with a loud sound. I whispered to myself, how could he do this? I realized my own son stabbed me in the back. I looked at the dirty walls and the closed door. I had no home. I had no family. I was all alone. 2 days later, the heavy door of the hallway opened. Mark walked in. He carried 3 large plastic bags. They were full of my old, wrinkled clothes. I stood still. I did not move. I did not cry. My eyes were dry, but my heart felt like a heavy stone. I knew this was the final goodbye to my past. He did not look at me. His hands were shaking as he put the bags on the dirty floor. I felt a strange, heavy silence between us. I looked at his shirt. It was messy and very wrinkled. For 40 years, I made sure his clothes were perfect. Now, he looked like a stranger. I thought about all the mornings I woke up at 5 just for him. I whispered to myself, he is already losing himself without me. "Mark," I said softly. He stopped. He kept his head down. "Mark, did you have breakfast this morning?" I asked. He did not answer. "Who ironed that wrinkled shirt for you?" I asked again. "Mother, please. The debt was too big." "I had no choice," he whispered. I took a deep breath. My hands were cold. I knew he was lying to himself. "You took the house to pay your debt to the bank," I said. "But tell me, Mark, who will pay for 40 years of my love? Who will pay for the life I gave you?" Mark looked up for 1 second. His eyes were red and full of shame. He looked like a scared boy, not a man. I felt a sharp pain, but I stayed still. I knew I could not protect him anymore. He had stabbed me in the back for money. He took my love for granted, and now it was gone. He turned around and ran. He did not say goodbye. He ran to his car and drove away fast. I stood there for a long time in the quiet hallway. I felt the cold air on my skin. I thought about my red roses and my warm kitchen. I whispered to myself, I have lost everything. I sat on my small, hard bed. I knew my life as a servant was over. I felt empty but also strange. I thought, maybe the pain is a door. I whispered to myself, I must be strong. I heard later what happened in their new life. Mark and Jessica moved to a fancy apartment in the city. It had tall glass walls and bright white lights. It looked expensive, but it was very cold. Jessica used the extra money from the house to buy a fast car and many designer bags. She was happy, but Mark was not. I thought about our old home. It was full of warm yellow light and the smell of fresh bread. Now they lived in a glass box. In the new flat, Mark lived in a nightmare. I knew Jessica would not care for him. There was no hot soup on the table. There were only plastic boxes and the smell of rotting fast food. The smell was terrible. I thought about my red roses. But in their new home, there was only the smell of old trash. Mark looked very tired. Every day he went to work in a dirty, wrinkled shirt. He had no one to iron for him. He took my service for granted. And now he was paying the price. One morning, Mark looked at his messy clothes. Jessica, please, he said. Can you iron my shirt? I have an important meeting. Jessica did not even look up from her phone. She screamed, I am not your servant like your mother was. Do it yourself. Mark stood still. His hands were shaking. He felt a sharp pain in his chest. He whispered to himself, or maybe to the empty air, what have I done? He walked to the mirror in the hallway. For a second, he saw a shadow. He thought he saw me in the kitchen cooking and smiling. He saw the light I brought to the house. But when he turned around, there was only darkness and trash. I knew then that he realized the truth. He did not just sell a house. He sold the soul of his life. He felt so small and weak. Without me, the expensive apartment was just a cold cage. I thought about his empty heart. He had the money, but he was all alone. He finally realized that he lost everything that actually mattered. I knew his nightmare was just beginning. 6 months passed. Mark's world turned into darkness. Jessica spent every dollar and left him for a richer man. The bank took the new apartment because he could not pay. One afternoon, Mark arrived at the home. He looked terrible. His clothes were dirty, and he was very thin. He knelt on the grass and sobbed. "Mother, I am so sorry," he cried. "I have lost everything. Please come home. I need you to take care of me." I was sitting in the garden with my new friends. We were sharing stories and laughing. I looked at Mark. I felt a little sad for him, but my heart did not hurt. I thought about the 40 years I spent serving him while he took my love for granted. I knew that I could never go back to that cold kitchen. "Mark," I said softly, "I forgave you a long time ago. You are my son." He looked at me with hope in his eyes, but I shook my head slowly. "But I will not return to be your servant. I am finally living my own life." I looked at my watch and smiled. "I must go now, Mark. I have a painting class with my friends." I stood up and walked away with a straight back. Mark stayed on the ground. His shoulders were shaking as he cried. I felt a moment of silence in my soul. I whispered to myself, "I am finally free." I knew I was enough. I thought, I am not all alone anymore. I have found my own home inside me. I bought a small white pot and placed it on my windowsill. I planted a single red rose. Every morning, I watched the sunlight hit its green leaves. I felt a quiet joy. I started teaching the other women here how to care for flowers. We talked and laughed together for hours. For the first time in my life, I knew my own value. I was not important because I served others. I was important because I was Grace. I thought, I am finally standing on my own feet. My heart felt light and warm. I whispered to myself, I am not just a shadow in a kitchen anymore. Mark started visiting me every Sunday afternoon. He sat on the wooden bench, his shoulders heavy and tired. He had paid a high price for his greed. We spoke about the weather and the small flowers. I felt a soft peace, but I kept my heart protected. I thought about the day he stabbed me in the back with that black pen. I loved him as my son, but I knew my boundaries. He never touched my money or my documents again. He could not control my life. I kept my freedom in my own hands. I whispered to myself, my life belongs to me now. I knew I would never be all alone again, because I finally had myself. I look at my blooming rose and take a deep breath. I thought about my long journey from that cold kitchen to this bright window. I felt a peace I never knew before. I learned a hard lesson. Loyalty is not a contract, and motherhood is not a service. If you treat your mother like a servant, you will end up with a house, but never a hoe. Me. I whispered to myself, I am finally enough. If you agree that Grace was brave to say no, type strong in the comments. I take a deep breath. My heart is quiet. In our modern world, money often hides the face of love. My story is a warning for every parent. I thought love meant giving everything, but I knew later that respect is more important. First, never sign a document if you do not understand it. Even if a family member asks you, do not let them take your love for granted. Second, do not sacrifice your life until you lose your own voice. I whispered to myself for many years that my only job was to serve. I was wrong. Finally, true happiness comes when you learn to love yourself. I felt truly free only when I stood on my own feet. Your value is in the peace you find inside. Thank you for watching this story from Prime English Stories. What do you think? Would you forgive Mark if you were Grace? Comment yes if you agree. If not, share your thoughts below. Please like and subscribe to join Peak's family of stories. We love your support.